When my husband's alternate personality, called the cowboy, a malevolent, evil person, scares your home health care nurse and her 85-pound dog to where they're cowering in the recliner, watching this scene unfold between my husband Jim and me. Stay tuned in this episode when you hear how everything turns out. In part 26B, the previous episode, you heard how Jim intruded on the basement space during the last 90 minutes of my plasma infusion and how it was not allowed. It was against the rules. That was once a month, my private space for 7 or 8 hours. But he disrespected those rules. And you're going to learn what happens and how everything turns out in part 26C of Surviving the Man I Married. I'm Sarah Wilder. Thank you for being here. Thank you for hanging in there. And thank you for tolerating my noisy outdoor episodes. So in 26B, Jim had stopped his performance. We had kind of gotten in a little bit of a loud voice, semi-shouting match, and he reached down with his face up against mine and into my left ear, had hissed some nasty words to me, telling me I was just like Boyd, which was a co-worker at Walmart. He and I knew Boyd, and he had a violent, verbally extremely violent, loud confrontation, and Boyd quit working at Walmart and left. And now Jim was comparing me to that guy. So I knew right away, Jim is at odds with me and maybe I'm in danger. I don't know. But I instinctively, with my IV tube taped up left arm, I swatted him away from me. And that's when he stood up, got behind my chair, and dropped, heavily dropped. Because when Jim was the cowboy, he moved very strangely, like he was uncomfortable in the body. His huge basketball player hand plopped down on my bald little head, dragged across it, and it hurt. And I reached up with my right arm and I very forcefully shoved his arm away. I yelled at him to stop touching me and get the blankety blank out of our basement. Don't come back. And I also promised him that once he left, if he were to even touch the doorknob and come into the basement space, either Nurse Rita or I would call 911. And that would be the end of his problem causing for the day. However, 17 days earlier, when he tried to take my life by poisoning me, those cops were no help. They were at my home for 37 minutes after the ambulance took me away. They were speaking to Jim. And you know what? They never showed up at the hospital to get my side of things. So it was a hollow threat. The minute I said it, I'm sure Jim was laughing internally because those cops had no interest in helping me. Anyway, okay. So I don't know if it was the beautiful makeup I'd done that day. I got up early that day, did a full face of makeup, didn't have to do my hair, obviously, put on my favorite Free People dress. So I had an internal rage fire that had been festering and burning the whole 17 days between the day of the poisoning incident and the day of that infusion. And all of those things, the confidence I had from the makeup, the dress, the little internal rage fire, I was successful in eradicating the cowboy from our space. And the whole way, uh, he hauled his butt up those basement stairs. He was grumbling about what a nasty person I was. What a nasty person. And this guy, this behemoth of a multi-personalitied man, was finally going up the stairs. And I looked at my nurse. I saw her pale face, her hand clutching her phone, wrapped around her legs that were tightly folded against her chest, her dog pressed against the upholstery of the chair. And I knew this is not okay. This is all wrong. I told the nurse, Rita, I'm very sorry this happened. I apologize for the confrontation. I could see you're uncomfortable. If you feel you want to call 911, please go ahead and do so. It's your right. I told her I supported her right to feel safe at work, and that if she felt like it was time to get help in, I supported that. I also promised her, with the big brass pair I was wearing that morning, that in no circumstances would I allow that man to be in one piece by the time the cops did get there, should she call them. That I was going to take my IV pole if I had to, and I was going to absolutely Lancelot style, joust that mother effer right through the midsection. I didn't give a shite. I was going to shish kebab his 275-pound ass with my IV pole. But you know something? I was on the defensive. I was fired up. And I had by that point, another 45 minutes to go. And I was motivated to let my nurse feel safe. I was motivated to defend myself and us. And it was in that space that we finished the rest of my infusion. So for the remainder of our time together, Rita and I and the dogs were undisturbed by any of the versions of Jim that we had ever encountered. He retreated. So when we were all done, we headed upstairs and towards the front door. I could hear that Jim was upstairs in his room, the master bedroom, and the TV was on. And I peeked up the stairwell and I could see his double doors were closed. So Rita and I went outside with her dog. I put my dogs on the porch too because I had a dog fencing that blocked them from being able to go down the stairs. So we made our way down the path and we said our goodbyes. But when Rita got to her car and opened her door, she looked back at me and said, "You know what? Are you going to be okay? Are you all right? I feel kind of funny leaving you with everything like this." And I said, "Rita, I got this. I got this. I can handle it. I've been here before. I've been through worse. I'll make it." And she said, "Okay, but let me know how you're doing. Okay, call me tomorrow." And I said, "Okay." So for the rest of that day, the dogs and I hung out on the porch. I popped out a nice big blunt of Durban Poison, my 44-ounce Coke Zero that I poured myself because I dumped out the drink that Jim made for me, rinsed the cup and got something new. And I stayed out on the porch. And let me tell you what, I stayed out till dark. I went inside long enough to feed Dolly and Rosie, and I stayed on that porch till dark. I avoided him. I only went in when I had to, and I didn't even eat dinner. I was so sick. I did feel sicker than usual because of the confrontation. But you know what? I was ready to roll. I was ready to face whatever came my way. And I set up shop in my recliner that was at the base of the main staircase. And right next to me was a big dresser that I kept all my weed supplies in. And then on the other side of me was an air purifier, a big professional air purifier, and the front door. I felt comfortable and I felt safe and I wanted to stay there. And that's where I set up shop in my recliner for the rest of the evening until Jim came downstairs. And that's when things got really even weirder. So when Jim did come downstairs, he would kind of prowl around the house, keeping an eye on me. When you can tell when someone's actively monitoring you, either eavesdropping or staring at you, and the wheels are turning. And this is what happened. So I stayed in my recliner, which, faced the forward towards the TV. And then Jim settled into his chair where he was also facing the TV, but his back was to me. And I had my phone, and I'd been monitoring a text conversation that involved all four of my daughters and me. And I hadn't been texting a whole lot because every time my puffy, long fingernailed hands went for the screen and I was tapping a text response, I could hear him kind of turn his head and actively listen. And when I would do that and he detected I was texting, you know what he would do? He just circled me like a damn great white shark. He would get up out of his chair, come over to where I was, to my right, go up the stairs. And when he would go up the stairs, and they were kind of steep, he would look down onto me sitting in the chair and try and look and see who I was texting. So then I would have to play this game where when he'd get behind me, I'd flip the phone over and wait till he got up the stairs. It was cat and mouse. Sometimes he would get up from his chair and go into the doorway and between the kitchen and the living room. And if you've seen the other posts, I can't remember which one, uh, part 23, I posted pictures. Oh, actually, it's a pinned post. There are pictures of the inside of my home where the poisoning took place, showing everyone what the rooms looked like. And you'll see there was a wide arched doorway. He would stand in that, all 6'2" plus of him, put his long arms on each side of the doorway, hands pressed against the walls, and stare at me, and just stare at me blankly, wheels turning, big pupils, black eyes. It was like being hunted by a shark. And this is what went on for hours and hours and hours until he finally went to bed. And that's when I could finally sleep on and off until he left for work the next day. And that's a whole other episode. I want you to stay tuned because in the next part, in part 27, you're going to hear how I woke up that morning and how I had to leave in a big fat hurry while Jim was at work. I'm Sarah Wilder. This is Surviving the Man I Married. And please stay tuned for more exciting stuff in part 27.